Thank you, Elise.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for coming. So today I'm going to be talking about how to find and sell great talent. Okay, so how do we define recruiting? It's two things. One, finding the talent, meaning going out and actually finding candidates in the marketplace. Number two is selling the talent. It's one thing to actually get a candidate into your office at an interview and figure out if they're going to be a good fit for your position or not. It's quite something different to actually attract them, make your job sound appealing to them if you decide that they are a good option for your company. If you figure out, are they qualified, the next step is to try and get them interested. So when it comes to finding talent, there's several different options to consider. I'm just going to kind of gloss over these. So first, everyone knows about the job boards out there. You have Monster, Indeed, Career Builder. LinkedIn is the biggest one, and you can post ads. A lot of them have like resume databases that you can search, it's pretty self-explanatory. The next is using a staffing agency. That's what I do. Working with a staffing agency has great benefits when it comes to saving a lot of time. Like for example, if you're going to use a job board, you spend a lot of time either putting together the ad, going through stacks of resumes. If you're using a resume database, then it takes a ton of time just to go through all the different candidates, make phone calls, send emails. Staffing agency is going to do all this heavy lifting for you. However, big downside, they are expensive. If you decide to hire somebody, well, then you're going to pay an exorbitant fee. So we're not cheap. Then the next way to find folks is to hire an internal recruiter or an internal recruiting team. Elise, you said you have how many recruiters at NextJump?
I think everybody really plays a part in it, but we have about 4 or 5 main people that are in charge of recruiting.
Like dedicated in-house recruiters?
Yes.
Okay, so very similar to your
Emily, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, we actually don't have a dedicated recruiting team.
Okay.
So I'm curious your thoughts on how to go about that. We have the recruiting as a culture initiative, so everyone's responsible, but there's a few of us who are on that initiative as a side of our job.
And Emily is the captain of that initiative, so.
Okay, so you have a question regarding that? Where am I looking, by the way?
Sorry, the boss speaking.
I just want to be clear that we don't have a dedicated recruiting team.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the question is how, if you don't have a dedicated people that it's their day-to-day job, could you potentially beef up or increase recruiting or increase that department? That makes sense.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, somebody has to take on that responsibility. You can have somebody who that's all they do in a company, or it's part of their function. But either way, they're probably using a job board, going through LinkedIn, maybe working with a staffing agency. They're doing something on-campus recruiting. It's part of their function to go out and find talent. Okay, so I hopefully that answers your question in regards to internal recruiting. Another way is to have an employee referral program. A lot of companies, they incentivize their current employees to refer their friends, former colleagues, and the way they do that is they say, all right, well, if you introduce a friend or a colleague, former colleague I should say, that we ultimately end up hiring into the company, then we're going to pay you a referral fee. That fee usually ranges somewhere from $1,000. I think Charlie told me last time I was here, NextJump used to pay $10,000 for referrals. But generally speaking, it is a lot cheaper than working with a staffing agency. Our average fee that we charge our clients is about $20,000. All right. For us, as an agency, our best source of finding candidates comes directly from our candidates, the candidates that we currently work with and that we worked with in the past. So, candidate referrals specifically. So, Active candidates are the candidates that we're representing today, ones that we currently have in process with our clients. We know they're looking. Okay, we're talking to them all the time during that process. So it's really easy for us to ask them for referrals of folks who are doing similar work or just in the industry in relation to our other jobs. The other type of candidate is a passive candidate. Now, a passive candidate is defined as somebody who's not looking, or we don't necessarily know if they're looking, but they're in our database. We have their contact information. We can generally pick up the phone or email them at any given time to check in. And on the one hand, see if they're looking, if they're interested in a job that we have that's recently come up, or if they're not looking, if they know somebody. So speaking of which, I'll tell you how we go about getting a referral from what we call a passive candidate. Okay, so usually it works like this. We call that individual, and first we usually try and see if they might be interested in a new job that we have. Okay, so we fly to them. We say, hey, look, I'm giving you a call because it just picked up this amazing opportunity with this company called Next Jump, and you're the first person I thought of. You're one of the best engineers out there. Would you be interested in the spot? And basically, that's you pitch the opportunity with enthusiasm. If they're not looking for whatever reason, let's say they're happy where they are, or they don't think the job is a match, next question is, who do they know that might be interested? All right, it seems kind of simple. A lot of people are afraid to do this for some reason. They feel like they're imposing on people when they ask them, who else do they know? But if you don't ask, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay, so people, and in terms of why they feel like they're imposing, they think they're only serving their own self-interest, and they're this person's going to be putting themselves out. But people actually naturally want to help people that they know. So if you've done everything correctly, you've pitched the job, you made it sound exciting, and if it's not for them or they're happy where they are, you ask who else do you know who might be interested. They'll want to help. They'll be naturally inclined to want to put somebody else in front of you that might benefit from that position or that opportunity. So next is, again, this is for us. We have candidates that are actively interviewing. The best time to ask them for a referral, you can ask them for a referral anytime, but we find the best time is when they've just gotten a new job. Like you've just gotten them an offer that they've accepted, and they're incredibly grateful for what you've done for them. And at that point, they want to help. For us in recruiting, for our candidates, it's a free service. When we are successful placing somebody into a company, it's actually the company that pays us the fee. The candidate doesn't pay us anything. So at that point, we'll ask them, hey, do you know anybody else that, for example, if it's a developer we've just placed, who else do you know that might be a match for this company? They're actually looking for another developer just like you. And at that point, I can't tell you how many times I've asked that question to a candidate that I just placed, where they said, Mark, I'm so happy that you just found me this awesome job. I would be happy to send you any candidates that I know. And the next day you get 3 or 4 referrals to other candidates. And another thing is that at that stage, once you've actually found them a job, they won't be afraid to introduce competition. And this is kind of self-explanatory, but if you're interviewing for a position and you already know that other people are in the mix, the last thing you want to do is send somebody else that might be competing against you for the same job. So that obviously won't be an issue after they've already been hired. So next, does anybody have any questions about that before I move forward to the next part of my presentation? Okay, so, all right, so let's say you've been successful finding a candidate, getting them in the interview chair. the next important thing to do is actually sell your opportunity. So for us, when it comes to when it comes to interviewing our candidates the first time, we ask them 2 questions specifically that are really important when it comes to figuring out how to sell our candidates. All right, sorry, I gotta back up. I'm actually getting ahead of myself. So basically, when it comes to selling our our opportunity or your opportunity, for us, the final question we ask all candidates following their job interview is, do they want the job? Okay. So when we do that, we usually get one of 3 answers: yes, no, or I don't know. And the main reason candidates are unsure about whether they actually want a job is usually due to lack of information. Okay. Interviewers have a bad habit of only screening candidates against their job qualifications, and they don't actually tell or sell their candidates enough about the opportunity that they have. Okay, so good question. How do you sell a candidate during a job interview? All right, so there are a lot of ways to do this, and it starts with having the right person in the interview chair. Okay, so you have to assume that there's going to be more than one person meeting with a candidate at any given time, and if that's you, then great. It's your job. You know it best, you know how to sell it best, but you want to make sure that the other people who are going to be interviewing the candidate are going to be just as qualified, just as good to actually sell that job as you are. So first it starts with having a positive, enthusiastic employee. The last thing you want to do is put somebody in that chair who is going to negative sell the company, isn't very excited to be a part of your organization. So somebody who genuinely believes in the company, for example, like Elise, for example, you were saying earlier that you interview a lot. You don't necessarily know how to recruit, but what you do is you ask a bunch of questions and then you talk about next jump. So there's probably, there isn't, even though she's not a recruiter, there probably aren't too many, people that are more qualified to sell next jump than Elise. Because she talks about it with enthusiasm. She knows all about the culture. So she would definitely be the right person to put in that interview chair. All right. So the next is you want somebody who's going to understand the opportunity that they're going to be considered for. I know a lot of times where people will go into an interview, they'll interview with the hiring manager. Next person has no idea what the job is that they're actually being interviewed for. All right. And that's very frustrating for the candidate. And related to that, a lot of times they're not even on the same page. They think they're interviewing them for a different job. The responsibilities aren't the same. And what happens is the candidate just comes out of the interview completely confused. They don't know, what the actual job is going to entail. All right. Next is they're prepped on how to interview. Okay. They, for example, first qualify the candidate. Make sure that you think they can do the job, and then sell them on any, on the company, our team, the projects we have, and make sure that you give them time to ask questions at the end of the interview as well. All right. Next part, when it comes to selling candidates, discover what they want and what they don't want during the interview. All right. So for us, we ask 2 specific questions to all our candidates when we first interview them. The first question we ask is, what type of opportunity are you looking for? Really simple, straightforward, but you actually learn a lot of information with this question. A lot of people don't think to ask that. They just go straight into the interview. Again, just try and qualify them against the position. But this, if you are just if you're just, like asking it honestly, they'll give you a ton of information. Next question is what we call reason for leaving. All right, and ask them why they want to leave their current company. Okay, so again, this tells you, whereas what type of opportunity tells you a lot of information about what they're looking for. When you ask them why they want to leave their current company, it gives you a lot of information about what they're not looking for. All right, and you leverage that information to reinforce how your position could be a match. I mean, obviously, if these two things are not in line with what your position offers, then be honest. But I'll give you an example. Like, speaking of NextJump, all right, let's say I were a recruiter at NextJump, and I asked a candidate, what type of opportunity they're looking for, and they said to me, I'm looking for a company that has a great culture. Okay, and why are you looking to leave your current company? Well, and this is an answer we get a lot. The companies, there's a lot of instability in my current company. They're going through a lot of layoffs. A lot of people are leaving. So in terms of selling NextJump, I'd say, this company has one of the best cultures out there. And as a matter of fact, they have a no firing policy. All right. In the last few years, their turnover has been less than 1%. All right. So next, candidates want to know what exactly they're going to be doing. Okay. Don't rely solely on a written job description. A lot of people make the mistake of just thinking, all right, well, I sent the job description to the candidate, or I put it in front of them, so they know what the job is all about. I don't need to tell them about it. It's much different to hear it from the horse's mouth if you tell them what they're going to be doing on a day-to-day with enthusiasm. Okay? If you don't sound excited about it, how are they going to get excited about the position? Okay? That includes things like, cool projects they're going to be working on, great clients you work with. If it's a developer, an engineer, the thing they care about most is cutting-edge technologies. So tell them about the things that you're working with or going to be working with in the future. Okay. Next, company culture, office environment. If you guys have all done the NextJump Academy or you work at NextJump, you understand how important culture is to most people. So give them a tour of the office. A lot of times when people go in for an interview, they come in, they sit in the lobby, they wait. They get taken to a conference room or an office, and when they're done with the interview, they're walked out the same way they came in. So if you like somebody, when you're done, give a tour of the office, introduce them to some of the people, let them see the environment, feel like the energy and the vibe of the place. Okay? Next is talk about your company's vision, mission, core values. Okay. Another thing that's extremely important that people want to know is who are they going to be working with. All right. So talk about the team structure. Pretty straightforward. And have them meet with team members, even if it's not necessary. Let's say you've already qualified them. Well, great. Still have them meet with other people on the team, particularly if you prep those other guys on how to interview. And at the end, give them sufficient time to ask questions at the end of the meeting. All right, so you want them ideally to leave the interview with enough information to make a decision. All right, again, going back to the I don't know, it all comes down to I didn't get the chance to ask the manager enough questions. I didn't get enough information. So even if you've done everything right, even if you think you've pre-qualified the candidate, pitched the job, sold them on it, got them excited, I guarantee they're still going to have a few more questions. And if they leave that interview with those questions answered, when you go back and present them with an offer, you're going to get, well, I have to think about it. All right, or just more questions. All right, so last question, is it still worth it to sell a candidate that you deem isn't qualified? Okay, so the selling part of the interview is done usually during the latter part. So you can always cut it short if you determine that they're not a fit. And if you're not sure, then it's better to have the right of refusal. When I sell an opportunity, I never do it halfway. I always go full tilt. But again, you're better off if the candidate's chasing you down for the position when you're not ready to actually hire them, as opposed to you trying to chase that candidate down. All right, and them, saying that they're not interested because you didn't sell them enough on the opportunity. All right, and honestly, worst case scenario, even if it's a bad candidate, if you've properly sold them during the meeting, then you've just created an ambassador for the company. This person's going to go out, they're going to talk to their friends, their former colleagues, people that they know, and say what a great company NextJump is. All right. So next part of my presentation is actually based on questions that people asked. Sarah was kind enough to send them my way yesterday, and I was able to get them into my presentation. So this is the first question that somebody asked me. How do you hold salary expectation conversations? Who asked that question? Is that person here? Or?
Yes, Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Their mic is
what does she do?
So Emily is, and I don't know if you want to explain.
Will I be able to hear?
Yeah, she's.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Oh, bring it over.
Yeah, I'm actually a senior software engineer here, but I'm also, like I said before, casting and recruiting. And like I mentioned before, we don't have a dedicated team, so many NextJumpers are involved in the process, involved in the interviews and determining the offers.
Okay, so you ask candidates, you have to figure out what salaries that they're looking for at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, so pretty straightforward. You be direct. Don't dance around the issue. First, for us, we always ask our candidates, what is their current salary? I don't know if you're getting that information, but always just ask them, and don't ask politely, just ask directly. If you ask, would you mind telling me what your current salary is? You might get actually I do kind of mind giving you that information. But just, ask casually, ask directly, and get a breakdown. A lot of times people will give you their full compensation. They'll even work in their benefits and their perks and all that kind of stuff. So ask, let's say they tell you, my current salary is $100,000. Ask them, okay, is that your base? And get that piece of information. All right, so you know where their starting point is. And then ask them, okay, so what are you looking for? What salary range are you looking for? Okay, and even go forward, go to the next step and ask them, what is their bottom line? Easier to ask when you're a recruiter, to be perfectly honest. But if they trust you, that you have your best or their best interests at heart, a lot of times they will give you this information. All right. Did that answer your question, or do you want a clarification? Okay, great. Okay, next question I got is, when interviewing, if a candidate is giving generic responses, how do you dig deeper? Who asked this question? Oh, hi. What's your name?
Crystal.
Crystal. Great. And what do you do, Crystal?
I'm director of marketing at NextJump, but I also help with the recruiting process and a lot of lateral training and interviewing.
Okay. All right. So this is a great question. I love this question. So really, there's two things that you can do. One is, to gain the candidate's trust during the interview. Now, how do you do that? A lot of times when people interview candidates, they're formal, they're buttoned up. And if you come across as being a little bit too strict and just not casual, not friendly, then they're going to be less inclined to, be open with you and honest. So it's all a give and take. So if you give them the impression that you're going to give them as much information as they get or they give, then they're going to be more open in general. Okay, but again, this is more intangible. The more tangible solution is to respond to generic questions with more probing questions. Because you said, tell me more doesn't cut it. All right, so what I always do is I phrase the question in a different way. Usually, you get generic responses to questions like, and maybe you can confirm or deny this matches with what you've seen. Questions like, why are you looking to leave your current company? I hear often, well, I'm just looking for a better opportunity. Okay, that tells me nothing. All right. So the next question I ask is, okay, great. But tell me, what is it about your current situation that's lacking? Okay, and sometimes, I mean, that doesn't work. You plow ahead, you ask another question of, well, look, you wouldn't be sitting here with me if you were completely happy where you were. So tell me, how could your current situation improve? All right, so you just have to, keep asking questions until you get the information you need. And honestly, for us as agents, failure to get certain pieces of information is not an option. So if somebody is being reluctant to give me an answer to a question, then I'll tell them. I'll say, look, this is essential for me to know exactly what like, for example, reason for leaving, why you're looking to leave your company, because I need to present this information to my client in order to effectively represent you. So I don't know, maybe you can do some sort of rendition of that when, like you're talking to the candidate. Okay. Does that help? Okay, great, thanks. All right. So next question, rather long. Hopefully you guys can all read this, but essentially the person is asking if they get a referral to them or somebody put in front of them that is like a friend of the company, should they pass them? Should they, hire them or at least pass them on to the next level of interviewing, simply because of who they are? And who asked this question, incidentally? Somebody in Boston? Okay. Who in Boston was that? Oh. Okay, great. So for us, we do get a lot of referrals. I mean, I've talked about that being a huge source of our candidates. So we would be remiss not to interview somebody or at least speak to them on the phone that was a referral. So we always talk to somebody, always interview them, if they're a referral or because of who they are. But we would certainly not hire or represent that candidate to a client if they're not qualified or the right fit for the position. Basically, like what we would do is, I guess if I were in your shoes, I would talk to the person who referred that candidate and say, look, I interviewed them, I sat down with them, I did my due diligence, and I've resolved that they're just not the right fit for the job for XYZ reasons. And on the other hand, if you were to try and pass them through because you thought it was the right thing to do for that person, if you were trying to, please them, then it's going to come back to haunt you later. All right, and we're, like you have to ask yourself, what's more important? Not to upset this one person that referred that candidate, or not to upset an entire team or entire company by having them hire the wrong person. So next question, how do you best handle scheduling with both candidates and interviewers? How do you reduce the back and forth? Who asked that question? Good, I like you. You're a wonderful participant. Okay, so this one it's all about getting availability ahead of time. All right, so for us, for example, when we interview a candidate for the first time, one of our questions is, when are you available to interview? And we always clarify what times during the day, what days during the week. We want to know as much as possible ahead of time in terms of when they can actually commit to interviewing. So by the time we actually have a client that's interested in meeting with them, we can just call them up and say, hey, good news, the client wants to meet with you tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And make it super easy. And of course, on the client side, the same thing applies. You figure out, you pick up a new job. I mean, for us, we pick up a new job, and we ask the client the same question. When are you available to meet with, let's say we find you some folks that you want to bring in, when are you available to meet with them? You get days, times, the whole 9 yards. And make sure that they actually hold those times, okay? Tell them, look, I'm going to talk to the team and get you scheduled at one of those times, so don't schedule anything else. All right? And also, we have something we call the 24 to 48 hour rule, okay? And this is in order to avoid cancellations. Generally speaking, if you schedule an interview more than a day to 2 days out, the chances of it getting canceled or rescheduled are so much higher. I cannot stress this. I see it all the time. My team will come to me, somebody will come to me running up and say, Mark, I got an interview for Bill. Great, when? Well, it's next week, next Wednesday. I'll say, okay, call the client, call the candidate, and try and get it scheduled a lot sooner than that, because it's going to get canceled. Okay, and also make sure you confirm over the phone, via email. You can't confirm enough. And when I say confirm, when I talk to a candidate and say, they're set for their interview, I say, okay, you are all set for your meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So, are you confirmed? Is that set? Is there going to be any conflict? No. And make them tell you it's 100% firm. And same thing, you send an email saying, here's the information, here's where you're headed, here's who you're meeting with, and if you have any questions, give me a call. All right, next question. If candidates are constantly asking questions outside of the interview process, how do you handle these? Let me guess. Okay. Perfect. So one is something I actually talked about earlier, is you prepare your candidates to actually ask questions directly to the hiring manager or team members during an interview. That's what I do. I tell them specifically, I said, during your interview tomorrow, make sure that you get any questions you have about the position answered in order so that when you leave, you have enough information to make a decision. All right, this way you avoid a lot of questions outside of the interview process. And conversely, prepare the hiring manager or the team members, so they give the candidate enough time for a question and answer session. All right, and you're still going to get questions outside of the interview, and candidates vary. Some will ask a ton of questions, others not so much. But you know what? If they're a good candidate, if there's enough there, if there's enough interest that you want to sell them, then you're going to have to try and figure out how to answer those questions or get those questions answered for them. So for me, I answer the questions to the best of my ability. I don't BS. I give straight, honest information. And if for some reason I don't know the answer, then I will tell them, look, I'm going to try and figure that out for you, and I'll get back to you. Okay, and sometimes they ask you questions that you're not prepared to answer. The best way to respond to those is to answer their question with another question. All right, we get this a lot with our candidates asking what salary our clients are looking for. Okay, we never give this information because all they're going to hear is that top number. Even if we give a range, we say, oh, the salary pays $90,000 to $100,000. Well, guess what they heard? They heard $100,000. All right, so if that offer actually comes back, anything below $100,000, we're going to have a very tough time closing that candidate. All right, so this is how I would respond to that particular question. I'd say, all right, when we spoke last, you're looking for something in the $90K range, is that correct? Oh, yeah, that's correct. Okay, yeah, the job can pay that. All right, so that's how I handle that situation. And that's it for me. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or?
Yeah, so I think we have some time for some additional questions. What we'd like to do is you have index cards in front of you, so if there are anything that you would like Mark to address specifically, we'll go around each office. Maybe we'll start with you guys in the UK. I think, Kelly, you're fielding the questions? Yep. And then we can hit Boston up, see if you guys have any questions on, additional ones or what Mark talked about, and then we can come back to New York. So we will start with the UK.
They're on both screens, right? Because I keep on looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're both same thing.
Okay.
Hi Mark, thank you very much for your talk. So I was just curious, here at Next Jump, when it comes to recruitment, what we tend to do when it comes to the recruiting process, we do several screening interviews and then we have the assessment day in the form of the Super Saturday. Generally, if we want to make an offer, we make an offer to the candidate. But I was just wondering, do you have any tips on how we close a candidate? We've had some instances where candidates in the time between making the offer and actually starting their job, that they've actually decided that the role wasn't for them for various reasons. So just wondering if perhaps any tips on closing the candidate would help to avoid such situations.
How much time do you have? I mean, that is, the crux of what we do, honestly, is actually closing. So let me troubleshoot that question for a second. You said between the time that you actually make the offer and the time that they start. Now, have they accepted the offer and they just don't start the job, or is it that you extend the offer and they ultimately turn it down?
So I'll give you one instance. So we had our last Super Saturday, our last major recruitment day in November of last year.
Mm-hmm.
We made an offer to a young lady called Esther, and she accepted the job offer there and then. A couple of months later, she got in contact with us and she was just like, "Hi, I'd like to just come by and chat." And then she came in and she just basically explained that her circumstances had changed. She'd started a new relationship. I think he was working in Chicago or something, so it didn't suit her personally. So it wasn't anything against the company as such, but I'm just thinking maybe there's something that we could have done to perhaps sell the role a bit, closer on the role or the company. If there's anything that we could have done that maybe might have lead to more in the direction of taking the job anyway, but maintaining a long-term relationship or something different maybe.
Okay, now I understand. All right, so if she actually accepted the offer, then I would say you guys probably did a fairly good job on closing her on the offer. For me, I mean, it sounds kind of simple and straightforward. It's a time between when she actually accepted the offer and when she was scheduled to start. You said it was a few months? All right, so I don't know if there's any way to prevent that, but for us, when we have a candidate that accepts an offer, we try and get them to start with their new company within 2 weeks. Because we know it's, again, kind of similar to the 24 or 48 hour rule when it comes to interviewing. There are so many circumstances that are beyond our control that can come up as more time passes that will interfere with that person actually starting in that new job. A lot of times let's say they continue to get calls from other recruiters, they're presented with other opportunities, and they have the time, so maybe they go on more interviews. What the heck, why not? And before you know it, they've decided to accept a new position. And of course, during that time, they can leverage your offer to get a bigger, better offer from a competitor. So I'd say the less time from the period when you actually close that candidate, when you get them to accept the job and start, is going to play a huge factor in limiting the amount of what we call no starts. Okay. The other thing I can suggest is, if it's inevitable that there's a huge gap in between when they actually accept the offer and when they start, then somebody needs to keep in touch with them. Somebody should be calling them. I'm not saying like every day. You don't want to be their mom, but calling them once every couple weeks just to check in, see how they're doing. It's much better to hear, you know what, I've been approached by another recruiter who's got this other opportunity, instead of I've now accepted an offer from another recruiter with a different opportunity. Because there are things you can do to prevent that person from actually going through the interview process if they're getting approached by other folks. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
So we can go to Boston. I think Anuja's going to help with the questions, or maybe Emily, if you guys have any additional ones.
Yeah, Emily has some questions
Hi, Emily.
Emily, the questions are great, by the way. I love them.
Keep them coming, Emily. I'm actually going to give you my private numbers, so you can just call me whenever a question comes up. I'd love to help. So.
Oh, Emily, we can't hear you.
So we have a bit of ambiguity in our roles, and so like we just have like a business associate path.
Mm-hmm.
So if the role's more open-ended, like how do you address this with the candidate?
Open-ended in what regard?
So like through the interview process, we figure out, like we try to match their skills and interests and like what we think would be a fit and what team they would be fit on, but we don't have the candidates apply for a certain position.
Okay, so
how do you, like,
so basically, you want to know if you have a position that is not clearly defined, that you're interviewing somebody for. Well, first of all, will it become clear how they could fit in during the interview process?
yeah, later on in another date.
Okay. So I mean, to me, this is fairly simple. What I would do is I just be honest. I'd say, look, we have this. We have a few different opportunities here. Give them some ideas of what those. I mean, it's a great opportunity to sell them. As a matter of fact, talk about the different possibilities, and find out. First of all, during the interview process, what you think they're most qualified to do, and also what area they would be most interested in getting involved with. And as you go through the process and start to narrow that down, then you can become more specific about that role. Does that help?
Okay, so one that we have from New York is, so every job has like boring parts or parts that aren't like the most glamorous. How do you sell those or talk about them and make them exciting? Like, I think it's no job is perfect and there are going to be downsides to everything. It seems a little bit like false advertising, I guess, to not mention it at all. Like, how do you address that part of it?
Okay. Tell me about your job.
My job?
Yeah, just a few bullets. Like, give me the exciting, give me the boring.
Okay, exciting. I think it's absolutely awesome that I get to put together events like this. I feel that I'm actually touching our audacious goal to change the world by changing workplace culture and building different tools to do that. The other side, it can be very stressful sometimes because it is tied to such a big goal, and I feel like sometimes I get lost in trying to get there, and it stresses me out. So that's like a piece that keeps me up at night. Do you need more specific?
I think that can work. I mean, in essence, okay. So
or even the logistics
what's your title?
Head of branding.
Okay, so I'm trying to fill this role right now. It's with this company called Next Jump. It's a head of branding, and essentially this person is going to be their cultural ambassador. Okay, they're responsible for. Actually, now you can give me some bullets
of what I'm responsible for. So everything from PR opportunities, our corporate website, our culture tour, First Fridays, Next Chef Academy, all that stuff.
Okay, so amazing position, amazing opportunity for somebody who wants to get into this type of role. It is a little bit stressful though. So do you think that's something that you'd be able to handle? Yeah, what I would do is you highlight the positives first and get the person like jazzed about like the exciting stuff, and then at the end you kind of sneak in some of the negatives. All right, but usually they're sold at that point, so the negatives don't seem so bad.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Great. I think we probably have time to go around one more time. Kelly, do you guys have any other questions in the UK?
Emily?
Okay, great. Emily, do you guys have anything else in Boston?
No, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we can end with one more question.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Actually.
Go ahead.
From Stephanie.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to pick one. many rounds of interviews do you typically conduct, and like the timing component? You mentioned the 24 hours of something. So like, how long does it typically take?
Okay. For us, ideally, you have to do your process. You have to have them meet with who they need to meet with it. And if you can do it in, I'd say, 1 to 3 rounds, that's ideal. And the reason why after 3, 4, 5 rounds it gets to be a lot more difficult is considering you're interviewing lateral people, is because most of the people that, at least for us, that we represent, they currently work. So they only have so much time, or they can only make so many excuses to get out of the office. So once they've been on 2, 3 interviews, their bosses will start to question, what it is that why they have to go to the doctor so much, or why they've been sick so often. They start to figure it out. So on the one hand, there's that issue, and also on the other hand, if you're interviewing a candidate that is currently looking in the marketplace for a new job, then you have to realize there are other companies that are going to be trying to court that same candidate, and their process may be faster than yours. Okay, and if your process is taking months as opposed to weeks, and that other company is kind of equal to you guys, maybe offering an equal opportunity, or similar opportunity, I should say, similar salary, similar office environment, culture, et cetera, if they make that person an offer first, they're going to take it.
What's the rule of thumb for how many people a candidate should interview with when they come in for a session?
How many people you should have interview that candidate?
Or what's the overload? You said 1 to 3 sessions, 1 to 3 times.
Yeah.
What about when they're there? Are they meeting with one person? Are they meeting with cross-section?
Usually it starts, the first round is usually just one person. Maybe it's an HR manager, maybe it's the hiring manager. And if that person likes them, then they bring them back to meet with the rest of the team. Okay, and the third interview is usually an officer of the company that has to give their green light. So I'll give you an example. You have a hiring manager for production at a company. He meets with that candidate. He decides he likes that candidate. Then brings him in to meet with the rest of his production team. And if all the folks on the production team like that candidate, then they come back to meet with their chief operating officer, who has to give the green light. So, I mean, there's no set amount. Like, particularly if you're a really small company, maybe you're the only one who's actually doing the interviewing. But I'd say have them meet with as many pertinent people as possible, and try and get it done in as quick a period of time or a time as you can. Sometimes one interview session it might seem a little desperate if you bring them in, have them meet with everyone, and then pop an offer the next day. So it doesn't hurt to split it up a little bit. I'd say 2 to 3, and have them meet with whoever it is that they need to meet with during that time.
Does anybody else in New York have any questions that they didn't have the opportunity to pass on? So just one final question. It might be super simple, but like, how do you end an interview? I guess there's always that awkward time. It's like, okay, I just interviewed you. They're wondering how it went. You kind of have a sense of how it goes, and it's either, okay, it goes really well, or even if it's somebody that it's not super well, like, and you don't want to be like, oh, we'll let you know. How do you end it? How do you wrap everything up? Because it's clear that, they potentially want this job and are interested in working with you. Like, how do you end the interview process?
If it's clear?
Well, I'm saying, so say I'm interviewing somebody, and it's just somebody that's coming in for a business associate position, and I'm not necessarily making the final call if they're in or not. I like them, I'm going to give them a thumbs up,
Okay.
but I can't promise that. Or I don't like them, I'm like, oh, I know I'm going to give them a thumbs up. I don't think it's a cultural fit at all. Like, is there any tips or pointers, or even just like talking points that you have to like kind of close everything up?
It's different based on whether you like the candidate or not.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you don't think they're a fit. Thanks so much for coming in. Let me walk you out. I mean, be polite. You don't want to mislead them.
Right.
but also you don't want to tell them, look, you're just not going to cut it. Sorry, beat it. But if you do like them, you can remember. I recommend giving a tour of the office. That's a great way to kind of like wrap it up and also get some of those warm, fuzzy feelings. And sometimes, I mean, for me, when I've met with somebody that I like and I think we're probably going to hire, I'll go out and introduce them to some of the people on the floor and say, hey, this is Elise. Elise might actually end up working for us or something along those lines. You give them a little bit of, like just a little bit of, an indication that, things might be headed in the right direction. And another good thing a good way to end it as well is just, ask them. So what do you think? Do you think that this is the right opportunity? Is this something that you would be excited about? Awesome. Then, let's, the other way I end it, I have them check in with me. I'll say, does it sound like something that you'd be interested in? If they say yes, I'll say, great, let's do this. I'm going to talk to the team, see how everything went from their end, and check in with me tomorrow at 12 o'clock. All right, and we'll see if we have some updates for you. Okay, and the reason to give them a specific time, it's what we like to call a litmus test. They call you at 12 o'clock on the button or 5 to 12, then you know they want the job. All right, if they miss that phone call, not a good sign.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay.